Hey everybody, and welcome to the second week of class. You got through the first one, I hope. Well, if you didn't, please let me know if you're struggling with any aspect of getting the set up in the class, getting set up in McGraw-Hill Connect. Just let me know if you're having any issues there sooner than later, because as you can see, this week we really hit it, and we hit it hard. You're probably not going to have a more intense week in terms of having to cover ground in the class. So in this week, we are going to, you've already read chapters, hopefully 1 and 2 of the text, and did the problems for chapter 2. And then this week, we're going to cover chapters 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. 3 and 4, the homework is due, the homework being the assignments are due on the 26th this week, and chapters 5 and 6, they'll be due on Sunday of this week. It's a lot of ground. Like I said, we were going to cover a lot of things, but these are the really solid foundational chapters of finance, and you're going to use them in later chapters as well. So let's take a brief look at what's involved with each of the chapters. So with chapter 2, if you've taken a class in accounting or had any exposure to accounting, you're going to probably remember most of this stuff that's in there, and hopefully it won't be too hard for you. If you've never taken a class in accounting, it's a good foundational thing that you really need to understand, mostly the terms and how things work. This is not an accounting class, but you do need to understand financial statements and how they work and what goes into them, because that's the basis of what we do in finance. So let's take a look at chapter 2. You want to be able to understand what an income statement is. You also want to know what the price-earnings ratio indicates. It's something that is talked about a lot in the stock market. Understand that the balance sheet shows assets and the financing of those assets with debt and equity. Understand what the statement of cash flows indicates. It does get used a lot in financial analysis, so please pay attention to those. And recognize that depreciation provides a tax reduction benefit that increases cash flow. It's just one of the things that we need to keep in mind as we consider how to finance some of the assets that we acquire. Okay, so that's chapter 2. Hopefully that will serve as a little bit of a review for many of you. If not, just take your time and go through it, make sure you understand it. In chapter 3, we're going to look at the basics of financial analysis, which of course is kind of core to the entire idea of what finance is. So in this, we're going to learn several different things, but we're going to be introduced to ratios, which are very commonly used in finance. Ratios are used primarily to be able to compare financial performance against other, say, competing firms in industry or something like that. So it's a way to for us to have an objective view of the financial performance of organizations and be able to compare. That we're going to learn about the DuPont system of analysis that looks at the true sources of return on assets and to the stockholders. It was developed quite a while ago, but it's still commonly looked at. So take the time to try to understand what goes on with that. You're going to look at trend analysis, which is a very important part of finance, and it's starting to become even more so with the injection of AI in a lot of the data that we have is allowing us to do trend analysis a little more completely, and explain why reported income must be looked at closely so you understand how it was actually generated. So chapter 3 is a basic setup for financial analysis, and will give you a lot of good feedback. In chapter 4, we're going to take our initial look at financial forecasting, something you're likely going to do, especially the higher up you go in management, in any organization, regardless of what function or what area you work in, because it's a very common way for us to look at and evaluate and make estimates as to what we expect to get from the things that we're actually managing. So so we want to be able to recognize that financial forecasting is essential to the strategic growth of the firm. I like to say this to students: the higher up the food chain you go in management, things kind of start to boil down quickly between two subjects. One of them is finance, the other one is strategy. And you have to make sure whatever it is that you're proposing and what you're managing fits both those pretty well and fits the objectives of both those very well. So you want to list the 3 financial statements used for forecasting, just borrowing a lot of what you saw in Chapter 2. The percentage sales method is used without question for forecasting, especially if we're not looking for something really exact. Just a way for us to kind of absorb what the financial impact of something might be that we're working on. So they make it sound like maybe it isn't used that much, but it is. It's used quite frequently. Explain why various methods of forecasting enable the firm to determine the amount of new funds required in advance. It's just going to say that nothing comes for nothing, and you have to figure out how you're going to make all that work in terms of the funds that you're going to need to do some of the things that you work on. And then understand that the process of forecasting forces the firm to consider seasonal and other effects on cash flow. And there's no question about that. We all understand what seasonal businesses look like, but they can be very trying on the cash flow of an organization when it's an off season, yet they still need to keep building inventory and buying things without getting that return at this. So it has an effect on the timing of what you expect to have happen. My background has largely been in business development, and in that regard, financial forecasting is a subject near and dear to my heart, and it's one that I think, if you're fortunate enough to get to a influential level of management and organization, it's something you're going to become very good at as well. Now, Chapter 5 introduces a very important financial concept, and that's the concept of leverage. You want to be able to define what leverage is and the relationship to the finances of the firm. You can explain what break-even analysis is for and why it's used. That's something that isn't so commonly used, particularly in analysis, but having said so, some firms look for that to help them kind of frame what they want to do with a particular project or business, part of the business. You want to be able to describe operating leverage, which is very different than financial leverage, but they do work in combination to help you understand what level of risk is coming about because of the leverage that you're putting into place. Combined leverage takes into account the use of both fixed assets and debt. This was a lot more commonly done before, but it's still done, and no question about it, because of the very stable interest rates that we've had for a long time. But having said that, it's not without risk. So you need to understand where that risk comes in and what things you can do to mitigate it. And recognize that by increasing leverage, the firm not only increases its profit potential, but the risk of failure. And that's just the nature of the beast. So back in the 1980s, primarily, I think into the 90s as well, when firms were being acquired, leverage was something that was a source of financing the acquisition itself. So we call those things leveraged buyouts. And when you look, keep that in mind, keep what you're learning here in Chapter 5 in mind as you think about how leveraged buyouts worked back in the good old days. Okay? All right, so that's Chapter 5. Now with Chapter 6, we're starting the third part of the course, which is talking about working capital management. And so Chapter 6 is our introduction to it, but it's something that is a very important part of the financing of the operations of any organization. And so the more you learn about this, it's kind of starting to get at the core of what financial management's all about. So let's take a look at Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is looking at working capital and the financing decision. So you want to be able to explain how working capital management involves financing and controlling the current assets of the firm. That's the important element of it. Recall that management must distinguish between current assets that are easily converted to cash and those that are more permanent. That distinction seems like it's pretty simple, but sometimes it can be a little complex. Recognize that the financing of an asset should be tied to how long the asset is likely to be on the balance sheet. So that kind of determines how this approach would be used. Explain why long-term financing is usually more expensive than short-term financing based on the theory of the term structure of interest rates, a very basic and important part of financial analysis. So pay close attention to that. You want to recall that risk as well as profitability determines the financial plan for current assets, and illustrate why expected value analysis may sometimes be employed in working capital management. And I can tell you that it is. So it's one of those things that you want to pay pretty close attention to. Okay, so that's chapter 6. So this is a pretty intense week, week number 2. You've got homework due on Wednesday and Sunday. The homework for that's due on Wednesday is for chapters 2, 3, and 4. And chapter 1, by the way, doesn't have any homework. And then in chapters 5 and 6, what we talked about, what you're learning about there, that those assignments are due on this coming Sunday. All right. So how does homework work a little bit? Well, you're going to do those things in the McGraw-Hill Connect. It's already set up. You just need to open it up. Actually, you can access that through D2L. It's under McGraw-Hill assignments. You can get to each one of them. And you go through, you do the homework. It's use whatever means you have to help you determine the answers. You might look at tables. It's going to depend on what exactly you're working on, but you might use tables. You might use a financial calculator. We're going to look for those opportunities. And by the way, the textbook does an outstanding job of pointing out where you can use Excel, which I strongly encourage students to use and learn how to use for any of these financial problems that we're going to do, because that's what people use. I mean, they don't use HP12C calculators, and I haven't seen anybody pulling those out at a meeting in a long time. So, we're using spreadsheets and the financial analysis features of spreadsheets. So learn how to use all those different things. Go ahead and finish it. You're going to find out how you did, but you're going to get feedback on it after the deadline. So let's say chapters 2, 3, and 4. If you want to learn more about what did I do right or what did I do wrong, you'll be able to do that after Wednesday. Okay, so you don't get that beforehand. You get it after the deadline's the deadline to turn it in is expired, and then you can get that. And you get in the text. I should say the website gives you really outstanding feedback. It tells you exactly what you did right and wrong, the right way to do it, and maybe where you came up short. I think it's a fantastic textbook for that. So hopefully that'll help. As always, if there's any questions as you go along, let me know. Please be prepared to jump in this week. This is a time-consuming week, and it's one that's going to be fairly demanding. And so I want you to be really, really prepared to get on it and get through it. Don't fall behind now, because it will only get worse. All right. So just make your very best effort to get through all this stuff and do it as well as you can. And if you have any questions all along the way, you can ask me in an email, but unless it's a yes or no type of question, chances are good we're probably going to have to hop onto a Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, one of those video meetings, and actually work through whatever it is you're working on, okay? Or having an issue with. So don't hesitate to reach out to me, but please send that email in D2L. I read those much more easily than I do the ones in the Oakton email, because Oakton email is just a mess. It's got so much stuff in it. Okay, so, and I hate to miss students' things. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. So send me any kind of questions that you have through a D2L email, or to set up a time that we can meet. Okay? And best of luck. I know it's a lot to do, but I think you can do it. All right. Let me know if you have any questions.